Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bankroll Burners, the podcast for poker players who can't stop getting it in bad. I'm Mike,
And I'm Josh.
and we are here, as always, to bring you some recently played poker hands that we have botched and/or played extra bad, and we're gonna review them and run through the spots and think about how each other could have improved.
And speaking of each other, this is kind of a bit of a special episode because I think all our hands from today are going to come from sessions that we played together. I took a little trip to Jacksonville. We had some best bet hands and sessions together. We played a couple hands against each other, most of which were rather cooler-y. Which that's life when you have two
It was
aggressive
such a
players.
cooler when I owned you with Queen Jack versus Ace King. Cooler
Yeah,
City.
that was sick, sickening. Sickening when the maniac runs hot.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, let's hop right into it. I'll go first. This is a 2-2 game, so we were both playing 2-2 at Best Bet Jacksonville. It's a $300 cap. It's 8-handed, which is something we don't talk about enough, but the Encore max is 9, and 9-handed poker just is definitely worse than 8-handed poker. Like, there's so many more people. There's, wow, there's one more person. But it does, affect ranges a lot. It affects, how many limpers and where you're raising from. So, it just kind of means you see more hands in general when you're playing 8-handed.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely notice a difference.
So, in this particular hand, we're 300 effective at 2-2. And in this particular hand was a little bit unique. There were only 2 limps, and this is a very, very limp-happy table. There were only.
I will say, what was pretty unusual about our tables is there were very few limped pots. There were enough players at the table who were raising, so that was kind of nice. But there was still a lot of limping going on.
Yeah, and it was a lot of limp calling and a lot of people it was an interesting dynamic because if you raised and the person next to At called, then every limper would call.
Right.
But not necessarily every limper would call. It was just once one person called, everyone else would follow suit, which is obviously a great game, but it is kind of a game where you have to wait for your spots a little bit.
Yeah, and I also will say, we've talked about this before, but live poker players, there's one concept in poker that they have all internalized, which is pot odds. And they're all able to say, well, I'm getting the odds, so I can call with 9-3 offsuit.
Right.
Because I'm getting the odds, which is not in fact correct, but
right.
That's sort of a fun phenomenon.
Well, anyway, in this hand, there's 2 limps from the hijack and the cutoff. Hero is in the small blind, which is where I get all my strong hands, and I look down at red queens. So the trend continues.
You check.
What? And I must say, by the way, this 2-2 game, I almost open folded small blind just way too many times.
Mm-hmm.
And I did once, but it didn't matter. And so I have queen, and I raise it up to 15. Probably could have gone to 20, but I'm out of position. I'm kind of good either way.
Yeah, I don't know. 15's fine over 2 limps, I think.
And then the big blind goes ahead and calls.
Nice.
But only one of the limpers calls. The cutoff calls. So the hijack folds, the cutoff calls. We are playing 3 ways out of position here. A little information on the players. The big blind seemed not, I wouldn't say solid, but he was a little bit tighter than much of the other table. Probably more fairly tight, I guess, especially compared to the rest of the table. And the limper that came along, I have tagged in my phone as Terabad. Because he was limping every single hand and calling no matter the amount raised most of the time pre-flop.
That's the dream, the 95% VPIP.
Yeah, and he was running relatively hot, hence the effective stack. He was doing good, and of course it was a great table, and he was a fun guy anyway, so we had a great time.
Okay.
So the flop is going to come out pretty bad for us. It's Ace of Clubs, 9 of Clubs, 4 of Clubs. We have got, again, red queens. So the overcard in the ace plus a club is just not really ideal. Or plus the 3 clubs, and we don't have one. It's not ideal. So we go ahead and check out of position 3 ways. I think this would be a real mistake to see bet this board with our particular hand.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think we have like we first of all don't need to bet that board this board that often, and we have plenty of hands in our range we can do so with.
Right.
So this seems like a pretty fairly reasonable just check and maybe even check fold. Maybe.
Yeah, I think it depends a lot on like sizing and kind of dynamics. I check, the player behind me checks, and then the cutoff bets 50.
15?
15, 1-5, which is a third pot. So I decide to call and peel for this price, mainly because like the player behind me checked, so his hand can't really be that strong if he's checking after I check. You know, if the big blind had checked, or if the big blind had bet and the cutoff had called, I think I can easily fold this.
I think it would be a mistake to call in that spot. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think here, I think that the big blind's going to do a fair amount of folding, and he's not going to be that strong. He's going to be pretty capped when he does call. You know, might not even have an ace. So I'm kind of okay like peeling here for this price.
I agree. I think you should call. So.
But then the big blind also calls behind me.
Okay.
Which is, not great, but he could easily have sort of a one club type hand, maybe pair plus flush draw. So I'm still not overly worried about really either of their ranges with sort of this sizing and the big blind call.
Yeah, I'm not really worried about the big blind. I mean, that's a really weak play, is sort of checking after you check and then just calling.
Yeah, like check over call is like really weak, right? Because if you like check and then like check raise there would be like super strong.
Oh yeah, I mean obviously you're snap mucking there
no
matter what. But yeah, I mean it's funny we say this because I was definitely in a spot where you remember this hand with the check over call and the dude ended up having two pairs. So.
Yeah, sure. But that player also
it does happen at these stakes when people just don't know how to raise or play even anything but very passively. But for the most part, this is probably a weak hand.
Well, and I was going to say, if as we've said a couple times before, when you think about live reads, like if we have the live read that someone is weak, that doesn't mean they have a bad hand. Like that gentleman could have thought that his like medium two pair was a weak hand, and so it's just check overcalled. Right, and also, to be fair, I'm pretty sure he like
I think he perceive his hand as strong. He doesn't perceive his hand as strong.
And to be fair, he might also just be someone that doesn't raise, because seem to remember that gentleman limp overcalling with pocket aces. So,
all right. Well, there you go.
Well, anyway, the turn now rolls off the 5 of diamonds, which is pretty nice to see. It's a pretty safe card, assuming like neither player has an ace. It doesn't really change much, but I don't think there's any merit to leading here. This hand like just doesn't make any sense. So I check, and it checks around.
Okay, we may have the best hand here.
Yeah, I think it's possible. Yeah. I don't think it's all that. I mean, I think it's somewhat likely.
I think we have to, I don't know. If this goes check again, I think we win a lot.
Yes, I agree with that for sure. But now the river, I think, comes the single most interesting card in the deck, and it's definitely the big decision point on the river as it rolls off the Queen of Clubs.
Ooh.
So we make a set, but it also adds a 4th club.
Wow, that's really weird.
Yeah.
I don't really think we can ever be good, honestly, versus 2 villains, though. Like, that's just like... And if we are, there's no way we're going to get called.
Right. I mean, that's fair, right? Like, could we bet, like, 20 and just, like, try and get called by a naked ace?
I don't hate it. I don't think you're going to get punished by these stakes for doing that. If you're planning to just like bet fold really small, like bet small, fold to a raise, like I don't think most people will punish you unless you have a read that some player like might do that. So I don't hate doing that for some very thin value. I think it's certainly better than check calling, I would say.
Right. I don't know. I mean, this also came sort of right on the heels of our discussion about how like sets are like unfoldable.
Yeah,
which is quite interesting because like I feel like this is definitely a spot where the set is quite foldable.
Yeah, I think check calling here is pretty bad. Like, yes, on occasion some dude will just own you, but like that's okay. Sometimes you get owned.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of interesting. I mean, I'm happy to maybe keep going through the hand at this point, but I decided not to bet because I was like, I mean, I'm against two opponents. I think heads up, I probably would go for like a small bet and fold to a raise. And I also kind of think that the other benefit to that actually is that you're pretty much never going to get raised except by the king of clubs. Like, you won't even really be put into tough spots where like your opponent might have a weak flush. Like, people are like, I feel like these are boards where live players just like way under raise. You know, even if someone has like the jack of clubs, they're probably
Right.
not going to raise a whole lot, which by the way would be the second nut flush on this board since the ace and the queen are out there.
So I actually think you could not only bet 20. I actually think, I mean, how much is in the pot right now?
There's like 90 in the pot,
I think you could bet a third. I think you could get bet 30. I think you could get called
even
by Nate.
against two opponents.
I think a Nate, yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, I do. Because sometimes, I mean, for obviously, if you get called twice, you're no good. But
Yeah,
like
yeah.
sometimes, like it will go big blind fold, cut off, calls you with an ace.
Right.
That will happen sometimes, and sometimes you'll get called and lose. But no one's gonna like make a sick move here. I don't know.
I'm not gonna get raised by like 10-9 with no club.
Right, right. So I don't know. I think it's fine. I do. I think it'd
So
be fine to bet small here.
yeah, I agree. I think that makes a lot of sense as I'm talking it out. I decided to check here and like evaluate. Probably check fold. But then the big blind checks again, which I think is good because I thought he was kind of more likely to have like a pair and a club type hand.
Mm-hmm.
Just based on like how he'd been playing and like his super weak line on the flop. And the cutoff, like I don't even know if the cutoff would be betting like one club type hands like on the flop as a bluff.
Right.
Like it's kind of hard to say. And the cutoff
I
goes
mean,
ahead.
maybe it's like the king of clubs specifically.
And the cutoff goes ahead and bets 50.
I just fold.
Because I was kind of like I initially like was just gonna like snap muck, but then I was like I just like don't really think I don't know what the cutoff has here that's like really strong. Like I just don't think he has that many flushes. When he like checks back the turn and bet the flop, like I just don't think he's gonna be turning a lot of like he's not gonna be starting like bluffs a lot on the flop.
But what does he have that? But he's not doing this with an ace though.
Right. I mean that's true.
So he's not like value owning himself. So he's either complete airball bluffing, which means he was also complete airball bluffing on the flop but didn't continue on the turn.
Which is right? I mean, which is possible live where someone starts a bluff, they get called in two spots, they go, "Oh crap, I'm gotta give up." But then again, we check to him on the river, and he's like, "Well, I mean, I have to bluff." Like that is a live bluff
It's
spot.
possible, but I think this is a losing call in the long run. I think this is most of the time a flush. Like I agree that it is possible that sometimes someone's bluffing here, and good for those players. But going into two people on the river for about half pot, a chunky bet. I mean, $50 is a chunky bet at 2-2. People do view it that way. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, we're gonna get owned sometimes, but like I just think it's fine to just fold here because like how often is this just absolute air?
Right. I mean, that is the question. But I just kind of thought like all the other thing that I was kind of thinking is like if I call and like the big blind does have a hand with like a random middling club, he's gonna have to fold.
Oh yeah, I'm not worried about big. I agree.
Yeah, so I was just
But
kind of like, well, if he's got it, I just don't, I don't know. It's a weird spot because I don't know that it is. I see what you're saying. The cutoff kind of needs to be airballing twice.
like, here's a question for you: is your hand different than King Queen with no club?
I
Like,
mean,
actually,
I think it is because
okay.
I think that because I think it is good to like beat any random like value spaz. Like, could he be doing this with two pair sometimes after the river checks to him? Like maybe.
I very rarely see it on a four flush.
Yeah.
I don't know if maybe I could count on one hand the times I've seen someone go for value with a non-flush hand on a four flush.
Right.
I don't think it's a two pair.
Yeah.
I don't really think your hand is very different than King Queen, honestly. But
Okay.
that's me. I mean, maybe if you disagree, that's fine. That's just kind of my
I
thinking
don't.
behind
I mean, I think that's an interesting point, but I think that like I don't know. I also think that like someone might just like not really think about value or bluff. Like he might just like bet a random ace like for some reason, like a tilt bluff. Like I'm no good now. Damn.
it. Yeah, sure.
Like I don't know. I don't think that's gonna happen all that often. I do agree with you, but I think that at least that's a relevant point that might make our hand different than
Yeah,
King
our
Queen.
hand it is in some ways better than King Queen, but like, okay. So what did you? So it sounds like you called.
I decided to call. Yeah, I've kind of decided I just want to call here. I don't want to fold my set. The big blind like kind of grouses for a little bit and then folds. And the cutoff mucks. The cutoff says I missed and mucks.
Okay.
I show my set and the big blind says he folded the 8 of clubs.
All right.
So
Hey,
I don't know.
nice. I mean, we always have. I feel like we've had this the last few episodes where I was like, I don't know, I just fold, and you were like, no, I hero call, and I was right. So
Which did what? Hey, how many episodes? If you go through our backlog of episodes, you can see many times when I hear. I believe one of our early episodes was called "I'm blocking aces"
that's true. Yeah.
because of a really interesting hero call that I elected to make.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not. I only tend to try hero calling like in these spots when someone's line just really doesn't make a ton of sense. But I don't even think his line is like that weird. I mean, I guess if your point is like live players don't turn one club hands into bluffs enough on the flop,
And like it
that's
kind of,
interesting. It's true.
and I feel like it has to be like the king of clubs. Like this guy was not a guy who was betting like at all for value. This was another. This was also a gentleman who was very much slow playing all his value, which is
So what do you think he was betting on the flop?
I
Because he was
don't
betting a draw apparently.
I don't know because he said I missed.
Right.
So I
So
don't
he
know
was
what he missed.
right. I don't know either. Yeah. I don't know. He could have just been lying, but like,
I mean, that's true. Like it sounds to me like he was probably like I don't know what I literally don't know what he could have had. Like 6-7.
yeah. I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, nice call. I don't know. I wouldn't. I would have folded.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair because I do think like I don't know. It's such a weird spot. I feel like these 4 flush boards are like rare enough where people just like kind of don't know how to play them. And I guess in my experience, I just rarely see people like betting or going for value with hands worse than the nuts.
I think that's true.
And I just don't give him credit for having a ton of king of clubs in his range.
Yeah, I mean, but you have to think like, what is he limp calling? King jack off
For
with
sure.
the king of clubs, king 10 off with the king of clubs. So there's 8 combos. And then how many random airball bluffs does he have? I guess he only needs what,
2
two?
and a half. Did 2, yeah.
So maybe you're right. Maybe it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, or maybe he just has a ton of king of clubs and I normally just get owned.
Yeah.
And maybe
I don't
he
know.
would have gone for sick value with like a jack or 9 of clubs, which by the way is definitely good.
Absolutely should.
Yeah,
do
he
it.
should be going for value with like any Broadway club, or maybe even probably any Broadway club when it checks to him.
Yeah. So, but I don't know. I don't know. I could be wrong here, and you could be right. So
Just a weird spot. And I thought this was funny because we had literally just talked that afternoon about like how good sets are.
and how you should not fold sets. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
that was
I know
definitely
that's-
ringing in my mind.
Yeah, fair enough. So, all right. Well, I've got a hand here. It's a pretty interesting one. We're gonna start this hand $360 effective at once again 2-2, and we're gonna be in the low jack. And we're gonna open it up to 10. It folds to us. And we get called by the hijack, the button, the small blind, and the big blind.
And what do we have?
We have ace 4 of hearts,
And then everyone left calls.
except the cutoff.
Oh. Button, small... Oh, hijack. Hijack, button, small blind, big blind, call. Okay. So $50 in there right away. So already, things are getting... The pot's getting big.
Yep, we are 5 ways to it.
And we're in the middle.
Yes, not ideal.
Okay.
I mean, this is one of those spots, too, where I will be checking probably ace. If I hit an ace, I will still probably be checking. I will probably be checking almost every board with
Right.
this specific holding. Because there are not really any boards five ways that are like bet 100s. So this hand is probably always going to fall into my check range.
Right.
So just a note.
Maybe if you make like trips.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. We don't make trips. The flop comes 9 of clubs, 4 of clubs, 3 of hearts.
Damn, running bad.
Yeah.
Okay. So we make a hand.
Yeah. Blinds check. We check as planned. I assume you feel good about that.
Oh yeah, I mean, especially this board. Even if it was a board that we wanted to bet a lot of our hands, this would be like a great board to not.
Yeah. I mean, it's not the most connected board, but there's probably some 9s out there, you know.
I mean, I guess it's worth noting that like we could bet because like even if people do have a 9, like we can definitely apply pressure. Like our hand is actually an okay candidate for like starting a bluff because like we have a lot of cards that give us equity. Like we have backdoor combo draws. And like also we can just like rep a lot of overcards if our opponent does have like a 9x type hand. So just worth thinking about, but I don't think we have to 5 ways by any means.
No, I agree. I mean that's an interesting point. I think it is good to think about, you know, turning these hands into bluffs early on. But we don't.
But I would definitely snap check this and not even think about that in the moment.
Yeah, so. I did. I didn't really think about turning this into a bluff at the time, but I guess I could have. You know, fair enough.
Yeah.
I check. The hijack now bets 35. This is a player who can bluff, and I've seen bluff, but also, you know, could very well have value here. So I don't think the sizing means much from this particular opponent. To be honest with you, this is an opponent. This is Ronnie, if you recall. He's a great dude. Big fan of his, but I haven't seen him I haven't picked up any sizing tells from him. So, yeah. You know, didn't really think much of it. So, and the button now folds, the small blind folds, and the big blind folds. So it's now back to me.
Okay.
And we go ahead and call. Do you think we should ever consider raising here as a bluff?
We could consider raising here as a bluff. Again, I think we have an okay candidate, and this is a pretty tight player when faced with aggression. You know, and we'll definitely fold a lot of hands, and we'll definitely fold a lot of hands if an overcard does come and we're able to sort of leverage that. So I think we could consider it. I don't know. It's kind of interesting. I don't know that I love check calling here, out of position against a large sizing. Because we are allowed to start folding hands, to pretty large sizings. And especially multi-way. But, if we're going to fold some ace-4, we do have the backdoor flush draw, which is nice.
Yeah, I mean, just because I know this player can bluff, I've seen this player bluff into multiple opponents.
But, even if you're playing against, a GTO opponent, you're supposed to fold some pairs against large sizings.
Okay,
on the flop. You know, it's kind of if your opponent, c-bets, a third, you have to, call with, all your, anything that, connects remotely. But if your opponent bets, pot, or, 2/3 pot, you're allowed to start folding, your worst, bottom and middle pairs. But I don't really think this qualifies, actually, because it is ace-4 and it has, you're what would you have done if you had, pocket sixes?
I probably would call. I think I would have called. I don't know if that's right. It's definitely uncomfortable. It's probably I mean, you could maybe call flop and just fold to any turn aggression.
That's true. And especially in live, where players are kind of less likely to sort of do these big multi-street bluffs and might give up and check. That's probably fine exploitatively. I haven't run this through a solver or anything, but I wouldn't be surprised if even if you're heads up, you're allowed to start folding some of those pair type hands. Maybe not to this sizing, but to some sizings.
Yeah.
But I think all that said, I think your hand is fine as a call or probably a raise. We have too much equity.
Yeah, I think a raise is interesting, but I think probably calling is mostly what you would do.
Yeah, and the stack size is already it's also a little weird with the big bet because if we raise, we're probably setting ourselves up for a turn shove.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's true as well. I also think like I'm thinking I'm behind here for sure. Like I think like a lot of the time I'm behind, but I do have some a bit, I think there are some play to be had.
Right. Well, and that's the other thing is like if you're against like a good opponent, right? Like against if you were playing like against a GTO opponent, or like if
Like
you
a
ran this to a
GTO pot.
solver, it might think you want to fold because you're often behind. You're like total equity with like some hands. Like I don't even, I can't think of any. I can't think of any like great hands on this board. But maybe if you have like another board where you have kind of crap bottom pair, you might just want to
Sure.
start folding. But anyway, I think the call is fine. 120 in the pot, 315 behind, and we're off to a turn.
Yeah.
With devious
So
intentions.
with devious intent, yes. We're thinking that we're going to have to be making some moves. And the turn presents what I would consider to be an interesting opportunity. The turn is now the 3 of clubs. So we pair the bottom card and the flush draw completes.
Okay.
And I have been trying to integrate into my game leading on cards that the previous street aggressor is likely to check back.
Right. Which I think is good.
I've been trying to integrate into my game, both for bluffs and value.
Good.
So in this spot, I decide to use this opportunity to start a bluff with what they call the weak lead. So I go ahead and bet $40. I lead for 40.
Well, I definitely like your sizing. I think leads should be pretty small in general when you do take this line. It's an interesting point because I think that you definitely want to do some leading, like on cards that the previous street's aggressor may check back. I wonder if you want the card to also kind of favor your range to do that, and I'm not sure that this card favors your range. It kind of depends on whether you think
I
your
don't know
opponent.
if it like who has more flushes here is sort of an interesting question.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't know who has more flushes. I guess pre-flop he probably would have more suited hands than I would, but once the action goes like check, bet, call, bet large call, I actually think it cuts down on his pseudo combos a bit. I think
Sure.
he's going to be checking a lot of, especially live player is going to be checking a decent amount of club draws there.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I also I do think you also have like more threes, like if that matters. Although it may just be that
He shouldn't have any threes.
right. So maybe that. I mean, you should have very few. Like you pretty much just have ace three suited, of which so they're kind of two combos of that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's kind of worth thinking about. Also, is you definitely have more threes. I don't know. Maybe that's irrelevant. Now the
I don't know that. I don't know that he'll give me credit for a 3.
Right. So maybe this makes sense as a lead in terms of what bluffs we should have. I mean, having a 4 is nice because it does cut down on his value.
Yeah, I mean, we could also argue like, oh, you want to have a club here, but I don't have that many one club hands.
Right. Maybe you have like ace king with like the ace of clubs.
That's it, basically.
Yeah,
right?
and the king
I
of
would
clubs.
maybe lead here with ace king with ace of clubs, but
I mean, you could lead here with ace king.
yeah, I might. I'm saying I might.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah, but like, I also think that I would want to be leading here with any overpair, which I will check call some overpairs on the flop for sure.
Sure.
I mean, I think probably like jacks, I would probably do some check calling. Maybe even queens versus that sizing.
Right.
Aces and kings, maybe it would be more of a check raise, but I don't know. Well, maybe. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I guess the one thing that I'm thinking about is like stack sizes here, where if he calls, we're gonna have like kind of pot and a half behind. So would your plan be to kind of jam a lot of rivers and like not just with this hand, but also sort of in a vacuum? Like if you have a flush, if you have an overpair, what's kind of your plan for rivers?
I was not planning to use an overbet sizing. I was planning to go about 3/4.
Okay, which is definitely somewhat exploitative. Just because like there wouldn't be that much left, like probably not enough to like fold to a jam in sort of balanced land.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I don't know that we would be if we just get called here. Are we allowed to overbet? Like maybe,
I mean,
maybe it
yeah,
is.
if you think right that you kind of have more flushes here, and like we definitely have more overpairs, so like we probably
Mhm.
do have a pretty solid range advantage on this board at this point. Then maybe we are just allowed to like ship a lot of rivers, like especially kind of clean rivers,
Mhm.
but even dirty rivers, like they're gonna complete a lot of our bluffs, and like our opponent probably doesn't have that many one club hands either.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, maybe so. Maybe I should be planning to overbet river. I wasn't considering it at the time.
Yeah, just thinking about it, it's
Yeah,
easy when I have the numbers right in front of me, and
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't.
But yeah, no, you're right. I hadn't thought of it, but you're right. I think. I mean, we have a little more than pot and a half behind. I think.
No, I think even less, right? If he calls, you'll be 200 in the pot, and they'll be like 280 behind.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're right. You're right. You're right. Yeah. Yep. Yep. So yeah. No. Then in that case, I think overbetting is great. Yeah, I think I didn't consider it in game, which dang, but yeah, I think that is
I
a
probably wouldn't have either. It's hard when you're just looking at your chips and you have to actually put money at risk.
yeah, yeah. Well, um, but yeah, so interesting. But I was at the moment I was planning that I was going to take a chunky size on river, but not all in size. Um, so we do lead for 40 here, and villain calls,
Okay.
which I didn't really expect. I don't usually expect folds to this move on that street. I
Right.
think
It's kind of like
some folds from like hands that were just taking a stab, which is fine, but
yeah, it's kind of like raising donks. You don't expect to fold on the flop necessarily, but you kind of do expect to start getting folds if you continue with your aggression.
right, right, right. So the river is the 10 of spades.
Okay.
And I don't know, what do we think about this card? Like, does this card change anything?
Well, I mean, it doesn't change anything kind of like nuts wise. I do think our opponent definitely has like more 10-9 type hands.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
but I don't know that that's actually relevant because like it doesn't 10-9 doesn't actually beat anything that you rep. Like really his hand strength is unchanged
Yeah.
even if he does have that particular hand, so it's probably a pretty big brick.
I think so. I think that's fair. So, yeah, I go ahead and I bet 135. Um, so, yeah,
We're
like
kind of
we said, I
sticking
think
with the
overbet would
two-thirds
be.
plan.
What's that?
Sticking with the 2/3 plan.
Yeah, I think overbet is better, but I do go with 135, and we get absolutely snapped um, by queen nine.
Offsuit.
Yes, queen nine with the queen of clubs, actually.
Okay,
So,
wow.
yeah.
It's like
So,
that's like a good. It's like a GTO call right there.
yeah, no, we got owned, but so yeah, hat tip, Ronnie. But it's interesting. I wonder if overbetting gets the fold. I don't know.
It's also interesting to think like I bet like if like you ever like talk to like Bart about this hand from Crush Live Poker, he would be like, I wouldn't be surprised if his sort of line of thinking was like, you should bet like 135 with value and take like a jam line as a bluff because you're just gonna get called so little when you jam.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if that's
that. I hate doing that, but that's the reason. That's why Bart wins at poker and I don't.
yeah, I hate doing that too, but it's like, that's how you make money live is you just play like disgustingly unbalanced and bet your hand and the players still don't adapt.
Yeah. Speaking of Bart Hansen and Crush Live Poker, Josh, by the time this is out, it will have already happened. Josh is going to be on Crush Live Poker's Colin show. We're very excited for that. So make sure to tune in. Well, I guess you
Make
can't
sure to tune in
maybe
yesterday.
maybe they'll make a cutout of it. So
Make sure to tune in yesterday.
make sure to tune in yesterday. But yeah, it's pretty sick. So
Yeah, really looking forward to it. We've of course both watched a lot of Bart and have been waiting to get on and get our play dissected by the master.
yeah, Bart is a legend of the game. We're both big fans. So, all right. Well, that's that hand. If you've made it this far, please like the video, comment, subscribe, do all the things, and we really appreciate it. It helps the channel out. And let's move on here to Josh's second hand.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a banger, for sure. We're starting this hand 315 effective, a 315 once again at 2-2. Um, this is going to be a hand that's even weirder than the last one. And first of all, there is a straddle on in this hand, so I am actually in that straddle. All three games that we played, the straddle was on intermittently. Two of them were better than the third. But a lot of straddling, a lot of action. So shout out Best Bet Jacksonville.
Yeah, great room.
Great environment. And this is going to be another weird hand as it folds all the way to the small blind.
That doesn't happen.
Which is unheard of. And the small blind raises to 15.
Okay.
And the big blind folds, and I elect to defend my straddle with 10-9 offsuit, having learned nothing from last week.
Nice.
Although it is a bit of a different situation, but just let me have my moment.
Yeah. Very good. Okay.
So just quickly adjusting the stack and pot sizes, and the flop is going to come out pretty darn good. 10-9-6 rainbow, 10 of clubs, 9 of diamonds, 6 of hearts. So we flop top 2.
Say it one more time.
10 of clubs.
10 of clubs.
9 of diamonds, 6 of hearts. We have got 10 of diamonds, 9 of hearts, so no backdoor or anything, but we do have top 2 pairs, so who needs backdoors?
Right, exactly. Okay.
And the small blind is going to start by leading out for 20.
Okay.
And this is kind of the first big decision of the hand. I mean, what do you think we should do here? Call or raise?
There's not a whole lot. I mean, I guess, well, let's think about this. I mean, you always want to think about, like, how dynamic is the board when you decide whether or not you want to raise with your 2 pair. I will say this is a fairly dynamic board.
Right.
So, but it's not a dynamic necessarily like that. There's going to be a lot of cards that bring in straights. It's what's going to happen is like top pair is going to change a lot.
Right.
Which I actually think is going to incentivize you to, because you're not really worried about getting beaten, but you are worried about maybe having your action killed. I actually do like a raise here, to sort of, because I think if you call, he might, and then an overcard rolls off and it goes like check bet, he might, you might fold, and then that's unfortunate. So
Yeah, that's fair. Hopefully, like with him being the pre-flop aggressor, like if it goes bet call and overcard rolls off, like he will. And I will say, this was a much more thinking player than like the rest of the table. This player was like pretty. And when I say that, I mean he was not limping. He was doing a lot of raising. That's kind of the only heuristic I had. But that's like a not a bad heuristic for an intro level. Is someone thinking about the game or not? So I would think that if like a king rolled off, he would like tend to rep that card a fair amount.
So you're saying like maybe if he's starting some kind of bluff, you can just sort of call down.
And I was also thinking like against a small bet, like a 1/3 pot bet, I would definitely raise here. But what I basically settled on is like his bet is on the larger side, which I did not expect because I do think this board kind of favors me as the caller.
I mean, blind versus blind is weird, but yeah.
Maybe. Like I should have all the 7/8, for example, and he probably does not.
Okay.
Like maybe he does, maybe he should, and it's kind of impossible to solve. And I did try and run this hand through the solver, and I was like, well, I mean, it doesn't really do straddles, so
Fair enough. Yeah.
Well, so I don't know. I kind of
our solver does not do straddle.
Yeah. Our cheapo solver does not do straddle. So anyway,
if only we had more bankroll, we could afford a more expensive solver.
If only there was some way to avoid to get that, huh?
Yeah.
So basically, based on those factors, and also there not being a flush draw on the board, because I think that's also like that would make the board, I think, significantly more dynamic. Like if there were like a front door flush draw, I'd be a lot more inclined to raise to try and get value now from those types of hands, and also that would really introduce a lot more action killing cards.
Sure.
So I guess between all those, I do decide to call, but I do like a raise as well. I don't think by any means it would be bad to raise here.
Yeah, I think I'm just worried about like trying to get our value now before things get kind of less attractive. But of course, if we think villain is going to be bluffing a lot, then I definitely don't want to raise.
Right. And I guess I don't know. I don't recall really seeing the villain like show down any big bluffs, but it's kind of hard to tell from like just a couple hours playing.
Okay,
But
all
I
right.
see your
Well,
point. It might just be good to like. I mean, it's
yeah,
also weird because if we raise here, like we won't be able to get the money in on their turn anyway.
sure.
Probably. I don't know. I mean, I guess we could just like go max greed and like raise to like 100 and then jam turn.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. Okay, but you can always raise here and then make like small bets on turn and river. You are allowed to do that just to get the money in.
Right.
So okay.
Yeah. I think that's probably good. But I decided to just call here this time. I call. I'm the hero. So 70 in the pot and 280, and I guess this. I mean, when we call, also it is going to be kind of harder to get the money in. It's worth noting. So my argument is a little self-defeating.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that I think there could be some, if you were calling, like, if you had a bluff here, like, if you had a float, I don't mind waiting till the turn to make your move. So in that way, like, perhaps you would want to wait on the turn to make your move with value. So what's the turn?
So the turn is not an action-killing card. It's the 4 of spades. So it completes the rainbow, and it is a disconnected undercard.
Okay.
But now the small blind checks.
Interesting. Well, yeah, I mean, this check from a live player is usually going to represent like giving up for the most part.
Right.
It could represent a second pair type hand as well.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think it's often going to be giving up. I don't know that it's necessarily like as polarizing as it kind of is, in sort of optimal land.
Yeah, in theory, this is supposed to be a fairly polarizing play where, they're checking a lot of nuttish type hands and then also like their give ups. What I think it's much more likely is this is sort of a weak range where you've got a lot of give ups and then you've also got like second pair middling sort of hands. So obviously these weak hands aren't going to call any bet at all. They're like complete give ups. But I wonder, like, I would like, if I were you, I want to put second pair in about as tough a spot as possible. So I'd be looking to make a pretty large wager here. Also, because given that the turn was a brick and you just called flop, you don't have that many. You don't want to bluff this card that much because it sort of doesn't make a ton of sense. So we're not really going to be betting here a lot in general. So I do want to use a pretty big sizing.
Sure. I mean, I think that all makes sense. And as I'm thinking, also like even like a polarizing check here. Like I wonder if you were supposed to check here sometimes with like over pairs. Probably not, but maybe, like, I don't know. In that kind of also lends itself towards betting big to like get value from those hands as well.
Definitely, yeah.
And that's what I decide to do. I bet 50.
50 into 70.
Correct. I think I could have gone a titch bigger. Because this isn't quite the right geometric sizing.
Yeah, I'd go a little bigger, but
I think actually potting it would have been correct. Would have been like correct for that sizing.
And I like that too because it's really like putting a lot of pressure. So
yeah,
I mean, this isn't a spot I don't think where you want to overbet certainly, but right. I think going pot if pot is geometric, then I would go pot.
Yeah, I think that's right. I was trying to estimate the geometric based on his stack, and didn't get it exactly right.
Okay.
And he thinks for a little bit and then calls.
Okay.
So there's now 170 in the pot and about 230 behind. So like pot and a third.
It's a little awkward.
It is a little awkward. Yes, exactly. I mean, I definitely could have gotten that extra $40 in, and we would be in a much cleaner spot.
Yeah. Okay.
And the river rolls off a pretty interesting card. It's the Queen of Diamonds. So final board here, 10-9-6, 4 queen. It ran out a rainbow board. There were no flush draws possible. Hero's got 10-9 offsuit. So we've got we flopped top two pair, and at this point, we've got kind of middle. I mean, good two pair, but no longer top two. And small blind checks again. And this is really where I think I went pretty deep into the tank, even live. And still kind of thinking about it. I was kind of not sure what sizing to use here. Like, because I think I definitely need to bet this. But this
Yeah,
card is going to be pretty, probably better for my opponent's range. He's got a lot more hands like Queen 10, Queen 9. I guess that's pretty much it. But the card is definitely better for my opponent's range.
I do not know if I agree with you simply because I actually think you run into a lot of queens here. Like a lot of your bluffs on the turn and floats on the flop and bluffs on the turn contain a queen. Queen
Like,
Jack, King Queen, Queen 8.
mm-hmm. Sure.
So and you don't have Ace Queen here, obviously. You 3-bet that. But I or like Queen 6, for example. Um, so I think this might actually be a much better card for you. I don't know.
Well, I mean I think that's a really good point that like we kind of run into pairs a lot here. Um, but I don't know that those pairs are like gonna be good a ton of the time.
Really?
Like, I don't know. I just don't know that like our opponent is gonna like check call like a pretty hefty bet with like a 9 all that much.
But a 10?
Yeah, definitely a 10. I mean, yeah, our opponent could definitely have a 10 like Jack 10. But I think our opponent should also have more like Queen 10, I guess specifically.
Interesting. I guess I mean, look.
I mean, I would bet a
Are
queen.
you worried about like being not good here a lot?
No, I'm not worried about
No.
being not good here a lot. I'm basically thinking with my so with a queen. I mean, I think I don't. I think it would. I do think it would be thin to shove like Queen Jack here.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it would be is what I'm getting at with basically that. But with this hand, I was not really. I'm not concerned that I'm beat all that much. I'm thinking if it's too thin to shove.
Hmm. Well, you can think about having multiple river sizes here. I agree that like with a queen specifically, shoving is probably not great. Um, so you probably have some type of 2/3 sizing maybe that you would take with a queen, or maybe half pot, something like that.
Yep.
Um, but the question is, do you have an all-in sizing at all? Um, I kind of, I mean, the thing is, I think he has a lot of 10x played, and I do want to go all in versus like I want to get the max versus 10x. Like I almost think like maybe it's not too thin to shove with the queen now. I'm almost talking myself, but
Right.
I
I mean,
mean,
maybe.
but I certainly think having an all-in sizing here, where like he really can't have any strong hands as played, besides specifically queen 10, which is like, he does have, I guess, a good number of combos of that. I guess there are 9 possible combos if you didn't have a 10.
Right.
But and if you do have a 10, then there's only 6 possible combos versus you can have actually a lot of 2 pairs here as played. So I actually don't hate shoving your 2 pairs here.
But what about a queen? Because now I wasn't even thinking about like what if I had Queen Jack here, right? Because like obviously you make a great point that like you're absolutely right. My hands like Queen 8 and Queen Jack and King Queen are probably going to play similarly up to this point.
Right.
So is that too is that too thin to rip it? It's like a kind of a really thin. It's very
Yeah.
very thin.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really understand. Can't really think of a good reason. Well, actually, you are blocking less queen 10. That's a reason. If you don't have a 10 yourself, he can have more queen 10.
But if we have a queen, then it's the same.
Oh yeah, yeah, right. I'm really dumb. Yeah, I guess I can't really think of like a good reason why you can't just like rip here with a queen. If you can rip with 10-9, why can't you rip with a queen? I guess like
Yeah, I guess I was thinking like he
it's
might.
pretty nasty. It's pretty nasty, but maybe.
I guess I was thinking like he could play over pairs this way.
But not kings.
I mean, maybe like aces or kings. Like,
Maybe.
I think maybe like he could check aces. Like it is a pretty scary board.
I think most live players won't.
Right. I mean, I think that's fair. That's just kind of what I was thinking at the time, and now I'm kind of thinking about with the queen. It's like, does how do we play the one pairs? But I think like you may be right. We may just be able to rip here. I mean, that means we need like a lot of bluffs.
Yeah, I also think too, if you think about like you messed up your sizing, quote unquote, on the turn, like if you actually had gone geometric, meaning and you had potted turn, I think jamming here with a queen is like simply mandatory.
Because it's just a pot.
So, right. So I think it's like I think it would be a very large mistake to not jam with a queen. So like when you really think about it that way, I think you should be jamming queens. So you should be jamming this hand too.
Yeah, I mean, I think okay. Well, that's fair. Well, I do jam. I did jam. I basically decided it's just too nitty to not just rip it here. Like,
love it. Okay.
And villain just tanks and tanks and tanks for quite a long time, and then eventually, reluctantly, calls, and I announce the two pair, and he mucks.
Sweet. Well played.
But I just don't know like what he had. That's why I was kind of thinking like it would be really weird if he like called. It's so tough to call a jam with a 10 here.
Yeah, but that's why we use these sizings. Our goal, we want to be like the solver likes to put people in spots. And that's kind of like I guess speak for myself. That is how I try to play. I like try to put people in these spots as much as possible.
You definitely put people in spots.
Yeah. So,
sometimes they're fist pump snap call spots, but they're spots.
Yeah. Oh my god. We had a hand this weekend that is gonna traumatize me for life. Where I just ran the absolute sickest bluff of my life, and villain just rivered a boat like a sack. So anyway.
Well, let's not dwell on that, and let's move on to the last hand of the night.
Yeah, last hand of the night. So this is a hand that we played. Then the last night we all played together, and this was a hand. I did run this through the solver. The solver didn't give me this hand, so take it. I had to add this particular hand into the combos the solver allowed. So you can think of that what you will. But this hand begins with a low jack open to $10. And we are sitting at the low jack has a stack of 210. We cover, and so they make it so they have 200 more. And we are in the cutoff with ace 3 of spades. We make it $30, and it folds back to him, and he calls.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking, I know we were kind of theorizing for a little bit about why the solver just kind of didn't want to do this, but it's probably, I don't know that I love 3-betting with like a small suited ace when someone's that short. Like that could be one, because I know you like to say, and I think it's very, very good point, that when you have like a suited ace, you really want to be able to play sort of a 3-street game. Mm-hmm. And it's unlikely that you'll be able to do that.
I agree.
So maybe that's one reason why maybe we should cut down on some of the combos. But of course, we're not here to knit it up or be the pre-flop police. We are like the pre-flop criminals.
Yeah, exactly. That's good. Yeah. Yeah. No, we definitely play too many hands. So anyway.
So just with that said, just maybe I just had that thought as I was looking at the stacks. Now, like the SPR is already 3.
Right. I agree that this is probably negative EV. So we make it 30.
Bankroll Burners in a word.
Yeah. Welcome to Bankroll Burners. It's negative EV. So yeah, need to not do this with a lot of small suited aces. The solver is doing a decent amount of 3-betting with, of course, ace 5 suited. And it is 3-betting ace 5 suited about 75% of the time. It's 3-betting ace 4 suited about 50% of the time. So it is doing a little bit of this small ace 3-betting, but that's it, So as we start to widen that out, you can imagine this gets kind of not great. But,
it gets upset.
Yeah. Okay. We were heads up, $60 in the middle. And the flop comes ace of diamonds, 8 of hearts, 4 of hearts.
Ace 8, 4, 2 hearts. We've got ace 3 of spades.
Correct.
Okay.
So I'm not at all displeased with that. The villain goes ahead and checks to us, as we would expect him to do. and we bet $20.
Okay, I think that's pretty standard.
Yeah, I mean, I think we always want to use a small size on ace high boards. We could even go 15 here, certainly.
Yeah, but I'm
But
fine with you. Yeah, I mean, if we use 20, we still have sort of enough behind to play two more streets. So I'm pretty happy with this.
yeah, and the villain does call. So
Okay, all seems straightforward so far.
yeah, and the turn is where I think is like a pretty critical decision point of the hand here. So
Okay.
the turn comes now the 5 of diamonds. So it brings the second flush draw. It's kind of I mean, it does give us also a gutter. And villain now checks, and I'm wondering, and so I guess like the real question is here is like, should we bet this hand?
Right. I guess, is what you're thinking. Like, if we were to bet this hand, given the nature of the board, we probably should be taking an all-in sizing. Like, if we bet this board, we should probably.
Well, I
Because we.
wonder if in a 3-bet pot that's still true, given like there aren't a lot of flushes available, especially to us.
Right.
Well, I mean, obviously, no one can have a flush. There aren't a lot of flush draws available.
There are zero flushes available.
Yeah, there's no flushes available. There aren't a lot of flush draws available, so I don't know that the double flush nature is that important because it's 3-bet pot. But I don't know. I wasn't really sure in game.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to me too, just because of like the stack sizes, and it's like, yes, it's a 3-bet pot. Now it's like super short. Like this is kind of, there's only a pot and a half behind. Do we just like, if we were to bet this board in a vacuum, would we want to jam? Do we want to deviate from that? I mean, if the villain is sort of more like stationy, do we want to kind of go like geometric and go smaller and just try and get 3 streets out of our small ace, or consider checking back the river on scare cards / folding to a donk?
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I think I didn't have any reads on this villain. First of all, it was very early in the night, so I can't say that. But I wasn't really sure. Like, I guess if this was a single raised pot, certainly I think we'd want to be taking a pretty big sizing on this board, like probably an overbet type sizing. And we probably wouldn't use this hand, I would think.
Right. This hand's probably a decent check back.
Yeah.
Because it can also call a river bet a lot.
Right. But I do wonder if, just because it's a 3-bet pot, if like, do we want to try and go like 3 small streets, like you said?
It's tough to get called by worse. Like, villain would really have to like not believe us and call us with basically a pocket pair.
Right. So maybe
can we even get called on 3 streets, or should we check here and then try and bet the river? If everything misses.
Sure. Yeah, that's possible too. Like, just kind of not resign ourselves to kind of like, this is not a hand we want to play stacks with, basically.
Yeah, and especially, when you kind of bring up the point that you definitely don't have that many flush draws, your opponent doesn't have that many flush draws, but so maybe we can maybe we can still like bet kind of chunky on the river, especially if everything misses, and just like, get called by somebody who thinks we missed.
Yeah, if villain checks river to us, if we goes check and villain checks river, like that's pretty weak. So we could reasonably like try to put those hands in a tougher spot by betting reasonably large, like probably not all in, but
Yeah.
So what's interesting here is the solver is betting only about half the time, and it's taking a small sizing, so it is kind of using that like.
How much?
40%.
Because that may, I don't know if the solver has the exact pot sizes, because sometimes the big blinds go all wonky. But is that like a geometric sizing, or is that not quite geometric?
Well, let's think. What's the SPR here?
It's 1.6. Because like if I'm looking at it right now, it's basically half pot would be geometric based on this.
Yeah, so it's probably trying to go geometric. This solver does not have half pot as an option, so it's probably trying to go basically as geometric as it can.
Yeah.
And it is actually betting our hand a decent amount, but it is betting ace 3 suited, but it is not betting ace 3 of spades at all. So it's betting ace 3 of hearts, which I actually find pretty curious, because my intuition would be to check ace 3 of hearts.
Right, and maybe bet ace 3 of spades to get value from the different flush draws.
Yeah.
Interesting. But I guess
I really think that's curious.
But I guess the thing is, like, ace 3 of hearts doesn't really block any of our opponent's flush draws. Because, like, we actually don't want him to have the ace of hearts because all aces either beat or chop with us.
True. I guess like his hand, it's irrelevant in terms of blockers, but I guess like, if it goes like, if I bet and he jams, well, I guess like I'm fist pump getting it in, probably.
Yeah, you're just snap calling with ace 3 of hearts.
Right. So that makes sense versus like I actually think it's probably a disaster if we get check jammed on with this holding.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. That like if we bet like half pot and he jams, like it's really bad.
Yeah. So I actually that actually makes a ton of sense. See, sometimes the solver makes sense.
Thanks, solver. You're smart.
So okay, yeah, I did check. I did check in game. I just really was kind of like I wasn't sure about this spot.
But that's a good point, and something that I think we've been bringing up a little bit recently, but something that I definitely don't think about enough is like the sort of often solver approved line of checking to protect your equity. Like checking back to protect your equity is something that I think people don't think about a lot, and I definitely don't think about enough, is like when your hand has showdown value and equity, and you think it's actually decent showdown value, it's not like bottom pair and you're pretty sure it's no good, you don't want to face a jam because like you either have to like call with like exactly the right odds, which is not really something you want to be doing in live poker all that much. Like, you have to, but it's
it's not ideal because you're never really sure about your opponent's ranges.
Well, when you feel that you have an edge, you shouldn't be looking for spots that are even.
Right. Also.
Or you have to fold and give up all your equity. And we have like a gutter here. Like we have 2 clean outs to what are almost certainly the nuts.
Right.
And we also have like if we hit a 3, we are probably good. If we hit like, we just have so much equity. It would definitely be a disaster to get jammed on. Like we might just, I don't even know what we'd do.
I think we like throw up and call, but that's not what you want to be doing in live poker.
Right, and that's yeah. So
yourself
just
in a spot. So
just something to consider. Right, I've put myself in many spots, and sometimes you also bluff and then realize you have to call, and that's also bad.
That's the worst outcome.
So I like your check back. Nice check. Good job adhering to the solver.
Yeah, well, I had it. I'm just kind of. They call me the human solver.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's the river, Mr. Human Solver?
The river is the deuce of spades.
Oh, you sack.
I'm a sack. So
we make a straight, and both flush draws frick.
Correct. And villain thinks and checks.
Okay.
So we're gonna bet.
Yep.
How much?
I mean, I think if we weren't kind of like, if we're not, I don't really want to take like a split sizing here, just because like we don't have that many hands that want to like jam. So I probably would just bet like, 2/3 or whatever you were kind of planning on betting if you missed and the river checked.
Okay, I think that's reasonable. Why don't you want to have like you don't think we jam it? Like you wouldn't want to jam ace king here?
I mean, I don't like. What are we trying to get value from with ace king?
A worse ace.
Yeah, I mean I don't know. I think that split sizings. I mean, I do think that split sizings first are just very hard to implement for humans. Also.
Yeah.
But like maybe it's okay to just do a jamming. And like the other thing is it's okay. But the other thing is it's okay to like exploitatively split your sizings. Like. Just because it's live poker, you're not going to get taken advantage of, and like this, every given board will never happen again.
Right.
So like, if you wanted to like jam these types of hands and like bet some amount with like ace 7 suited, for example,
Sure.
That would probably be fine.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, my thought was just like he can like as played, he never has a strong hand.
Right.
So like that was why I was like my thought like immediately was I always try to evaluate these spots and I don't always succeed as we learned in the earlier hand, but I do try to remember to evaluate spots to see if we can overbet jam. And I guess my thought was like, well, he just doesn't have like anything strong here. But on the other hand, like he can have like ace 10, for sure.
Right.
But like that's probably the strongest hand he can have. Maybe like I guess he can have ace jack, maybe some ace queen.
Probably ace queen. Maybe even honestly, maybe ace king. Probably not though.
You would hope not, but possible.
Yeah. I see your point. So you kind of thinking like, your opponent just has no strong hand, so you could just like jam here a lot to put max pressure.
Yeah, that was kind of what I thought, but I also think that like I wouldn't want to jam with like ace 8 suited or as a two pair, ace 7, let's say, or ace 9. I wouldn't want to be jamming with those. I don't think.
Right. I mean,
I think it's like value owning yourself, which you don't really want to do very much with the overbet.
very, very much. Yeah. I mean, I think it's. I guess the only caveat is like kind of similar to what we were talking about earlier. Is like, I just feel like, and we've talked about this before too. Is like live players are not gonna find the call down, like the calls with the top X% of their range. Like
Right.
if villain has like pocket like black kings here, the solver would probably say he's supposed to call a jam. Because it like unblocks all your bluffs, blocks your like a lot of your value, right? But like I don't think I would say like 90% of live players are gonna fold any combo of pocket kings here. Just for example.
No, fair enough.
But
yeah,
that said,
like,
maybe like
try to jam for max value, we're actually gonna get called less than we should be called.
Maybe right, and that's maybe.
Interesting.
But maybe he has more ace X than he should also. And so maybe those hands...
if you could have like random offsuit aces, I mean, we've seen it.
Exactly. So maybe that all balances out to let's just revert to, did you get sort of a thought from the solver?
The solver is doing a split sizing. It's taking 3/4 pot with most of its range. I mean, first of all, it's checking, obviously. It's checking back, lots of hands. But it's taking a 3/4 pot sizing when it's with most of its bets are for 3/4, but it is with a small percentage of the range. It is jamming.
And what are those hands? Are those like is ace? I mean, I guess it said we should fold. If we had like ace 3 of hearts, would it jam?
It's jamming all ace 3.
Okay. Well, I know we shouldn't have ace 3 of spades. Oh no, we did check back.
Yeah, we checked. Yeah. It's jamming all ace 3. It's jamming all ace king, and it's jamming. And then for bluffs, it's jamming. They're all king. Basically, any king X that's unpaired.
With no hearts. With hearts. Like, does it matter what the suits are?
Without... Actually, the suits are kind of... There's not really, like, any rhyme or reason to them. That's
okay. That happens.
So it's just basically doing a lot of overbet jamming as a bluff with unpaired kings, which is kind of curious to me. I'm not sure I understand that really. I guess because it blocks ace king.
And I think it's worth probably checking the pre-flop ranges and just seeing how much ace king it gives our opponent. Because I do think that like even in a vacuum, you're not supposed to 4-bet ace king all the time.
Opponent has very little ace king here, and you have to think that that's because they checked to us on the river. So I don't know. So that actually doesn't really explain it. So I'm not sure I really understand overbet jamming a king. I don't really think I get that. So.
Right.
Maybe someone in the comments, if you can think of why we would overbet jam an unpaired king as a bluff on this run out, let us know. Educate us. But anyway, we did jam, and we got a snap fold. Villain claims they had ace 6 suited. Cool. We got ownaged.
Maybe, if he was telling the truth. Yeah, it's always I mean, I think there's nothing wrong with jamming because if you don't have good especially if you don't have good reads on an opponent, I think defaulting to balance is the right play. I just know that like, again, I'm kind of it's exact similar to your first hand where we talked about like overbet jamming, where I'm kind of thinking about what Bart would say, which is like, players are just gonna fold so much to jams that like when you have value, it's such an exploit. It's so exploitative. It's so exploitable. But like that's okay. At these stakes, but
yeah, I will say though, I mean, players pay off jams more than you think though. Like, for example, your hand that you exhibit being a great example of that.
Well, and that's true too. And I mean, and that's a fair point that we have 160 here, and if we bet 80 versus betting 160, we can get called half as much and still have the same EV if we jam. And maybe that's the case. I mean, that's and
maybe we're actually getting called like maybe it's only folding out like a few hands.
Right, exactly. So that's the other thing to think of is, if your other sizing would be like 3/4 pot versus a jam, we do only need to get called half as much by jamming to make it profitable, to make it more profitable. Obviously, it's going to be profitable either way because we just binked the best card in the deck.
Yeah, absolutely. But so yeah. Anyway, I thought it was a pretty interesting one.
I think so too. I think that's really cool.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Well, you've spent another hour with us. We always appreciate that. We really do. And we're very excited to see what Bart Hansen has to say about Josh's play. We're sure it will be entirely complimentary. Um, and yeah, we'll see you next week.
Yeah, have a good one, guys. Thanks for listening.